In the shadows of history, when mighty empires that once thundered across the world were reduced to ruins, humanity has always asked the same question: how do we live a life of calm amidst the chaos of existence? Stoic philosophy was born in such a time, not to promise a distant paradise, nor to offer miracles of escape, but to hand us an invisible shield, the shield of a soul unshaken by turmoil. The Romans walked roads paved with blood and dust, witnessing cities in flames, friends who betrayed, power overturned in the blink of an eye. And yet, the Stoic philosophers remained composed. They stared into the storm without letting it disturb their hearts. They taught that chaos is not the enemy, but the teacher forcing us to master ourselves. And within that serenity, even the smallest human being could discover a strength greater than any throne. Picture, for a moment, the morning of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. As he opened his eyes, an empire of vast lands and endless unrest awaited him. Rebellions on the frontiers, scheming senators in Rome, plagues spreading, and the constant possibility that loved ones might be taken from him at any moment. Yet instead of letting fear strangle his heart, he wrote in Meditations, "Today I will meet the ungrateful, the deceitful, the selfish. But they cannot harm me, for their nature does not determine my peace. A man may be emperor of the world, but only when he rules himself is he truly sovereign." That is the Stoic reminder. Tranquility is not the absence of chaos, but the ability to walk through it without being swept away. When Seneca, the philosopher, was ordered to take his own life by Nero, the very pupil he once guided, he did not tremble, nor did he scream. He calmly opened his veins, speaking with friends and students as though merely closing the curtain on a banquet of life. For him, death was no catastrophe, only a natural conclusion of the universal order. Stoicism teaches us to look death in the face, not with fear, but with reverence, as one might greet an old friend knocking at the door. And in accepting death, we finally learn how to live. For each day we open our eyes, each breath we take, is a gift to practice courage, integrity, and love. In our modern world, we no longer watch bloody gladiator games in Roman arenas, but we drown in different storms. The pressures of work, the comparisons of social media, the fear of failure, and the unrelenting flood of news about war, disease, and disaster. Chaos still surrounds us, only clothed in new garments. So what can we do? Stoicism offers a principle both simple and profound. Learn to distinguish between what is in our control and what is not. Thoughts, actions, choices, those belong to us. Fame, wealth, the approval of others, those do not. When we focus only on what is ours, we find freedom. And when we release the futile urge to control what can never be grasped, we find peace. Epictetus, who rose from slavery to become a great philosopher, once said, "Men are not destroyed by events, but by their view of events. An insult may shatter a weak spirit, but it cannot touch a free heart. A loss may drive one person to despair, yet forge another into unmatched strength. It is we, not the world, that decide who we are. And that is the secret to serenity in the chaos of life. Not changing the world, but changing how we see the world." There are moments when it feels as if we are standing at a crossroads of fate. When disaster strikes, when illness suddenly steals a loved one, or when a terrible event sweeps away every carefully made plan, we often feel powerless, drowned in the violent currents of destiny. But Stoicism teaches us to see these moments differently, not as tragedies to mourn, but as trials to strengthen us. Just as steel is only hardened by fire, The human spirit finds its true strength only when forced to face adversity. It is this constant testing that forges souls unbreakable. And like mountains formed under immense pressure deep beneath the earth, each upheaval in life becomes the force that lifts us higher, until, from the summit, we can finally see. Chaos was never the enemy, but the silent ally that shaped us into who we are. In the pages of history, we see Stoic warriors enter battle, not with rage, but with quiet eyes. They knew an arrow could pierce the flesh, but it could never touch the soul. They knew death could come at any moment. But what mattered was not death itself, but how one lived before it arrived. That spirit allowed them to hold their heads high even in defeat. For them, defeat was not the loss of honor, but a lesson that made the soul stronger. And if we can live with the same mindset, then no matter how many times we stumble, we will always rise again, calmly brushing the dust from our shoulders and moving forward, as though nothing could shake the heart within us. Look at our modern lives. How many times have we lost our peace over a cruel comment, a cold glance, or a small failure in our careers? We let outside forces, things beyond our control, invade our minds and rob us of serenity. But the Stoics would remind us, you are not a slave to circumstance. A harsh word may be spoken, but only if you allow it to cut your heart does it wound you. A failure may happen, but only if you decide it is the end does it truly end. Everything rests in the choice of the soul, and when you realize you hold that choice, you begin to feel freedom, even in the crowded grip of modern society. There is a truth the Stoics never tire of repeating. Happiness does not come from bending the world to your will, but from aligning yourself with the world. Like a wise sailor, he does not curse the storm, but learns to steer his ship with the wind to reach the shore. Life is no different. If we expect skies always to be clear and seas always calm, we will be disappointed. But if we learn to accept storms, to turn every gust into momentum, we will not only reach the harbor, but become stronger with every voyage. In that acceptance lies the secret to peace, not because life is calm, but because the soul knows how to remain calm even when the seas are raging. The final image we must carry is Marcus Aurelius's reminder. All things flow away like a river. People vanish like breath. Fame dissolves like smoke. So what remains for us to hold? Only one answer: our character. The world may be chaos, but our souls do not need to share in its turmoil. An empire may fall, but the virtue of a single person cannot be stolen. When we understand this, we stop chasing what is fleeting, stop fearing what is lost, and begin to live as truly free beings. Freedom is not the power to rule others, it is the power to rule yourself. And in that mastery, humanity discovers its ultimate secret: serenity in the midst of chaos. In the shadows of fading dynasties, when power shifted like waves against the shore, one truth remained: what endures is not thrones or piles of gold, but the character and calm of those who live by timeless philosophy. The Stoics reminded us again and again, the world is always in flux, but the choice of how we respond belongs to us. When a city crumbles, when walls collapse into rubble, one person may fall into despair, while another sees in the ruins a lesson to rebuild. That perspective changes everything. The modern world no longer destroys with sword and spear, but with invisible pressures, constant comparison, the frantic speed of information, and inner crises hidden beneath polite smiles. Amid such chaos, Stoicism shines like a torch, reminding us that peace is not found in a quiet world, but in the ability to keep our soul quiet, no matter how violently the world trembles. There are those who spend their lives chasing the mirage of fame, believing that once they reach the summit, they will finally find peace. But as Seneca warned, seeking peace and glory is like searching for fresh water in a salty sea. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Peace is never found in the applause of the crowd, but in the mastery of oneself. Imagine a singer standing on stage before tens of thousands cheering, yet a few jeers are enough to shake his heart. That heart was never free. It was imprisoned by the opinions of others. The Stoic is different. They sing their song even if the audience turns away. True value is not measured in applause, but in the integrity of one's actions. When we grasp this, we can gently release the weight of public opinion and walk our path with unshakable calm. History shows us figures who stood in the storm yet remained serene. Marcus Aurelius, amidst the empire's endless struggles, still carved out time each night to write his meditations, not to boast, but to remind himself, no matter how vast his power, it was dust compared to the universe, while kindness and composure would outlast time. That nightly ritual kept him from being swept away by political chaos. In our own lives, we too need such pauses. Moments to ask if we have mastered ourselves, how we have responded to challenges, and whether we live closer to our ideals. That daily reflection is the anchor that keeps the ship of the soul from being capsized. And if we persist, we discover that peace is not a final destination, but the road we walk every single day. In today's world, where everything is measured by speed and efficiency, Stoicism reminds us that we don't always need to run. Sometimes, the most courageous act is to stop and breathe. The Stoic does not seek to do more, but to do what is right. Not to own more, but to desire less. In a society that urges us to consume endlessly, they teach us the art of letting go. And when we let go, we do not lose, we gain. We gain freedom from fear of loss, serenity from the burden of competition, and joy in the simplicity of small things. A morning spent listening to birds outside instead of rushing to check messages. An evening writing a few words of gratitude instead of scrolling through comparisons. These small moments, collected, become the bricks that build a fortress of peace in the midst of chaos. The deepest gift Stoicism offers is inner freedom. The world may chain the body, as it once did with Epictetus, but it can never chain the will. And when we realize that our will cannot be touched by anyone, we hold a power greater than any throne. Modern minds often confuse power with the ability to control others, but the highest power is the ability to control oneself. When we can master anger, restrain desire, and hold steady through turmoil, we become emperors of our own lives. This is the secret to living with serenity amidst chaos, not waiting for the world to change, but changing how we live within it. And when we achieve that, we see that chaos is only a mirror, while serenity is the eternal song playing in a soul that never fades. There are nights when we sit alone in front of a cold, glowing screen, the city buzzing endlessly around us, news crashing in like relentless waves, and in our chest, we hear the uneasy rhythm of our own heart. It is in these moments that Stoicism becomes a quiet friend, whispering in our ear. Sit still, breathe. Remember that all those things rushing around you are not within your control. What others think, how the world shifts, what fate unfolds, none of it lies in your grasp. The only thing that belongs to you is how you respond. A slower breath, a clearer gaze, a choice not to let fear rule you. That is the path back to serenity. And when we practice stillness of the soul amid all that noise, we find ourselves like a lighthouse, standing firm, shining steady in the middle of a stormy sea. The modern world worships speed, but Stoic wisdom reminds us that some values only bloom in slowness. A seed cannot bear fruit overnight, just as tranquility cannot be gained after a single attempt. It takes perseverance, day after day, like an artisan striking each careful blow to carve a statue. The Stoic trains not in easy moments, but in the hardest ones. When insulted, they see a chance to practice restraint. When loss arrives, they see a chance to practice acceptance. It is this repetition, carried through the years, that turns the soul into a fortress. And we, in our hurried lives today, can learn the same. Every hardship is not an enemy, but an exercise for the growth of the soul. Picture a person standing in a crowded marketplace, where everyone is shouting their dreams and their fears. Some scream about money, some flaunt their status, others sell anger and resentment. In that chaos, a Stoic chooses to walk slowly, refusing to buy illusions, refusing to trade peace for vanity. He smiles because he knows that his greatest treasure is not in his pocket, but in his heart. The world can take gold, honor, even life itself, but it cannot take away inner freedom. Once we realize that, there is no need to chase, no need to shout to prove ourselves, because serenity itself becomes the strongest declaration we can make. Perhaps one of the greatest lessons of Stoicism is harmony with nature. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Live in tune with the universe as a part of its whole. When you see the sun rise, remember it does not rise to please you, nor set to sadden you. It simply does its work. And so should we. Do what is right, whether praised or criticized, whether the world remembers or forgets. When we live as part of nature, we stop wasting ourselves in useless struggles to control everything, and instead, we begin to flow within the great rhythm of the cosmos. In that harmony, the chaos of human affairs shrinks, while serenity grows, like a river that flows endlessly without needing to prove anything. And finally, remember, Stoicism does not teach us to hide or to harden our hearts. On the contrary, it teaches us to love more. For when we are no longer bound by fear and anger, we are finally free to give love generously. The Stoic knows that everyone we meet is battling their own chaos, and so kindness becomes an act of courage. Serenity is not cold detachment. It is a heart strong enough to remain open in a world that urges us to close. When we can be at peace amid chaos, we not only save ourselves, we become a refuge for others. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of Stoicism: to turn an ordinary human being into a flame in the night, a light for themselves and for all who wander in the darkness. There is a simple truth that Stoicism never lets us forget. The universe does not revolve around us, and life was never designed to satisfy every wish we have. When we expect the world to always be fair, people to always be good, and life to always go smoothly, we plant the seeds of our own disappointment. But if we accept that the world is imperfect, that people can be selfish, and that hardship is unavoidable, we stop being surprised by difficulty and begin preparing for it. That is why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "Today, I will meet the ungrateful, the deceitful, the selfish." Not to sink into pessimism, but to avoid shock when it happens. Once we prepare our minds, obstacles are no longer collapses. They are simply part of the journey. And in that preparation, we discover a hidden weapon: serenity in the midst of chaos. Perhaps one of the most beautiful images in Stoicism is its ability to transform suffering into a teacher. Seneca once wrote that no one can become great without first enduring hardship. Look back at the hardest seasons of your life: loss, betrayal, failure. It was in those moments that resilience, compassion, and wisdom were carved into your soul. Without them, we would remain soft and fragile in the comfort of ease. Just as a grain of barley only sprouts when buried in darkness, the human spirit only grows strong when tested by suffering. Once we understand this, we stop cursing adversity and begin to feel gratitude for the way it shapes us. Serenity, then, is not a life without storms, but the ability to smile even when the storm rages hardest. In a world full of illusions, where social media drowns us in endless comparison, Stoicism is an antidote. The Stoic does not chase validation from the crowd because they know how quickly the crowd changes its mind. Today it applauds, tomorrow it forgets. Instead of running after fleeting praise, they turn inward. They ask, did I act with reason? Did I keep my integrity? Did I live with kindness? If the answer is yes, they find peace, even in silence from the world. That is what we need today, to steady our hearts not by likes and shares, but by the light of our conscience. When we live this way, serenity is no longer a luxury. It becomes the natural outcome of a meaningful life. Epictetus, born a slave, proved that true freedom comes not from status, but from the soul. His body was chained, beaten, oppressed, but his spirit could not be bound. From that place of suffering, he raised his voice to teach the world. The real enemy is not other people, but the weakness within us. When anger, greed, or fear dominate us, we are slaves, even if we live in palaces. But when we master those emotions, we are free, even in a prison cell. That is the great paradox of Stoicism. The body may be confined, but the spirit never has to be. And that is the lesson for us today. To find calm in chaos, we must first break the chains of our own destructive emotions. Finally, Stoicism teaches a simple but profound truth. Life is short, and we have no time to waste on resentment or fear. Live each day as if it were your last, not to despair, but to cherish. Speak words of love while you still can. Do what is right while you still have the chance. Forgive while there is still time. For when death knocks, we take no wealth or fame with us. Only our deeds and our character walk with us into eternity. And if we have lived with integrity and serenity, not even death can rob us of peace. This is the ultimate secret. Serenity is not about avoiding the chaos of the world, but about living each moment fully, so that when we leave, we can smile as if we have finished a beautiful song. There are people who spend their entire lives chasing power, yet never pause to ask, where does true strength really lie? They march through wars, amass wealth, climb to the peaks of authority, and still one day they look back and find their souls empty, like a desert thirsting for water. Stoicism whispers a simple truth. The greatest power is not in making others afraid, but in no longer being afraid yourself. When we dare to face the fear within, we see it for what it is, only a shadow cast on the wall, while we remain the true master of the room. And once we overcome that fear, we walk with serenity, unshackled from the illusions of power and wealth. Look deeper, and you'll see that serenity does not mean retreating from life. On the contrary, the Stoic lives actively, because every moment is an opportunity to practice virtue. They do not sit idly by, but act with full effort, yet without being chained to the outcome. They plant seeds, but do not demand the harvest to obey them. They fight, but do not cling to victory. And because they are not enslaved by ambition, they achieve more than those consumed by it, precisely because they are not afraid to fail. In that spirit, we learn a profound lesson. Live fully, step forward boldly, but keep the soul free from obsession with either success or failure. In the whirlpool of modern society, we often forget the beauty of simplicity. Stoicism reminds us that happiness does not come from having more, but from needing less. A simple meal can bring deep joy if we know how to be grateful. An afternoon spent quietly with loved ones, without extravagance, can become the most treasured memory of a lifetime. But when we let greed lead the way, even in a palace we feel impoverished. The Stoic chooses fullness in the small things, and in doing so, finds peace where others only find restlessness. Simplicity is not poverty. It is the richness of a soul that knows contentment. What's remarkable is that when we practice serenity, we do not just save ourselves, we radiate that strength to others. A father who stays calm in adversity teaches his children resilience. A teacher who remains composed in failure gives students a lesson more powerful than any book. A community that learns to master anger and fear builds a peace stronger than any weapon. In this way, serenity is not the private road of one person, but an invisible thread weaving humanity together, helping us all to stand firm against the storms of our time. And finally, at the end of this long journey, we see that the secret of Stoicism is not hidden in lofty theories, but in the everyday choices of life. Each day, we are given the chance to practice. When insulted, choose forgiveness. When faced with loss, choose acceptance. When fear arises, choose to confront it. When success arrives, choose humility. These choices, small but steady, build within us a fortress of serenity that nothing can shake. And when we walk through life, amidst all its chaos, we can smile and say, "I was not swept away. I found serenity in the world of men." That is the greatest legacy a human being can leave to the world.